Welcome to the Overthinker's Guide to Modern Marketing, or as we like to call it,
How to sell a sandwich without accidentally starting a cult.
Hello and welcome back to the Overthinker's Guide to Modern Marketing, the podcast where we gently untangle the curious relationship between humans, technology, and the strange but surprisingly predictable things we persuade one another to buy. I'm your host, Sean Makin, a man who has spent a large portion of his professional life in marketing and has come to accept that every few years someone invents a new piece of technology that is confidently predicted to replace marketers entirely. So far, we have survived email automation, social media algorithms, marketing automation platforms, and an occasional dashboard that promised to revolutionise engagement, but mostly produced colourful graphs and mild confusion. And now, of course, we have artificial intelligence, which has caused a familiar ripple of excitement, curiosity, and a mild existential dread across the marketing world. The question being asked in offices, webinars and conference panels everywhere is this: what exactly is the role of the marketer in a world where machines can generate content, analyse data and produce strategic recommendations faster than most of us can make a cup of tea? It's a reasonable question, but like most questions about technology, the answer turns out to be a little bit more interesting than the headline suggests. So today we're going to explore how AI is reshaping marketing, not by replacing marketers, but quietly redefining what they actually do. And perhaps more importantly, what humans still do better than machines.
Episode 6, The Curious Evolution of the Marketer, or
Why artificial intelligence hasn't replaced marketers yet, but it has stolen their spreadsheet work.
Let's begin our journey with something rather ordinary. The kind of thing that quietly filled many marketers' days long before artificial intelligence arrived with its digital clipboard and unnervingly efficient work effort. And that is spreadsheets. Lots and lots of spreadsheets. Marketing, for all its talk of creativity and bold ideas, has historically involved a surprising amount of admin activity. It's not the glamorous side of the profession that appears in conference talks or LinkedIn thought pieces, but the practical mechanics required to make campaigns actually function. You know the kind of things. Segmenting email lists, cleaning databases, building reports, testing subject lines, exporting data, then re-importing slightly different data, and then staring thoughtfully at dashboards while pretending one fully understands what engagement velocity means. In fact, if you've observed many marketing departments closely, you might conclude that marketing was largely the art of moving information from one spreadsheet to another while hoping the columns remain aligned. Now enter artificial intelligence. AI has arrived in the marketing world rather like an incredibly enthusiastic intern who never sleeps, drinks no coffee, and seems oddly delighted by repetitive tasks. It asks politely,
"Would you like me to analyze the behavior of 250,000 customers, predict who might buy something next Tuesday, personalize the messaging, optimize the campaign timing, and generate several hundred variations of subject lines?"
And naturally the marketer replies,
Yes, I actually would like you to do that. That would be extremely helpful.
because many of the tasks that once consumed hours, sometimes days, are now handled automatically by systems trained to recognize patterns faster than humans can. AI tools now help marketers in a myriad of different tasks. They can analyze customer behavior, segment audiences, optimize campaigns, predict purchasing trends, and automate personalization. In other words, the machines have politely volunteered to take over the busy work. And interestingly, most marketers have responded not with horror, but with quiet relief. Because after all, while spreadsheets are useful, they are rarely the reason that someone entered the marketing profession. Very few people wake up in the morning thinking,
I hope today involves cleaning a CRM database and generating 12 versions of a performance report.
marketing, at its best, has always been about something else entirely. Understanding people, solving problems, crafting messages that resonate, finding creative ways to connect ideas with audiences, and those activities require time, something many marketers historically did not have enough of. Artificial intelligence, somewhat unexpectedly, is giving them that time back. It's quietly removing the repetitive layers of operational work that sat between marketers and their actual thinking, which leads us to an interesting paradox. The arrival of AI in marketing may actually be pushing marketers closer to the human side of the profession, because when machines take over the mechanical tasks, humans can return to the thoughtful ones. So strategy, insight, creativity, curiosity. In other words, AI is not replacing marketers, it's replacing that part of marketing that felt very much like accounting. And if that means fewer spreadsheets and more thinking, well, that may be one of the more pleasant technological revolutions we've experienced in a while.
Part 2. The rise of the strategic marketer.
Now that the machines have graciously volunteered to take over the repetitive bits of marketing, spreadsheet wrangling, the audience segmentation, the quiet despair of building campaign reports at 4:57 on a Friday afternoon, something interesting begins to happen. Marketers suddenly find themselves with time. And time, as it turns out, is a dangerous thing for professionals who are used to being busy, because when the operational noise disappears, marketers are forced to confront a rather confronting question.
What exactly should I be doing instead?
This is where the role of marketer begins to shift from operator to strategist. In the past, marketing roles have often involved running campaigns, managing platforms, adjusting settings, and generally ensuring that various gears of the marketing machine continue to turn without catching fire. But in an AI-assisted world, many of those mechanical functions are being automated, which leaves marketers with a new responsibility, deciding what the machine should actually be doing. Because while artificial intelligence is excellent at processing information, it still needs humans to define the purpose of that information. Sure, AI can answer questions, but someone still has to decide which questions matter, and that's where strategy lives. So let's imagine for a moment that you ask an AI system to analyse customer behaviour. Within seconds, it might produce insights like
Customers aged between 34 and 42 are 17% more likely to click after 7 p.m.
or
Conversion rates increase when product descriptions contain the word premium.
very useful information, but none of it answers the bigger questions marketers actually care about. Questions like
What stories should this brand be telling? Why should customers care about us at all? How do we differentiate ourselves in a market where everyone claims to be premium, customer-focused, and suspiciously award-winning?
artificial intelligence can provide the ingredients, but humans still cook the meal and occasionally burn it, but that's part of the process. As AI tools become more capable, the marketer's job increasingly revolves around framing the right problems, because the quality of an AI system's output depends heavily on the quality of the input. Ask vague questions and you'll receive vague answers. This is why strategy meetings that begin with the phrase,
So, what should we do with marketing?
tend to produce action plans that involve posting more on LinkedIn, doing something with video, and somebody writing AI in large letters on a whiteboard. Ask insightful questions, and suddenly the technology becomes incredibly powerful, which is rather like making tea. If you simply pour hot water over a tea bag and wander off, you'll end up with something weak, disappointing, and vaguely confusing. But if you actually give it a moment, stir it thoughtfully, and perhaps add a biscuit for moral support, suddenly everything works exactly as intended. Technology, like tea, benefits greatly from a little patience and a surprisingly specific process. This is why modern marketers are becoming something like interpreters between two worlds. On one side, vast quantities of data, on the other, complex human behaviour. And in the middle sits the marketer, quietly trying to translate data into meaning, which is not unlike trying to translate cat behaviour into logical explanations. Technically possible, rarely straightforward. As a result, the marketer's role begins to move upward. Instead of spending their time adjusting campaign mechanics, marketers can now spend more time thinking about things like customer experience, brand positioning, long-term growth, cultural relevance, and the curious ways that people make decisions that absolutely make no sense until you realise that they are human. This shift places marketers closer to the strategic centre of organisations, because if marketing truly represents the voice of the customer, then understanding customers becomes critically important. And understanding customers requires something machines struggle with, and that's empathy. Machines analyse behaviour, humans understand it. AI can analyse behaviour at scale. It can tell you what customers did, but understanding why they did it remains a little bit more complicated. For example, AI might tell you that engagement dropped last week, but it may not immediately realise that the campaign launched on the same day as a global news event, 3 viral TikTok trends, and a particularly distracting photo of a dog wearing sunglasses. Humans, being deeply embedded in culture, are rather good at recognising these contextual subtleties. They understand humour, irony, trends, the unpredictable ways humans respond to stories and ideas. And these insights often shape marketing strategy far more than raw numbers alone. Which means the modern marketer increasingly resembles a translator, someone who can look at complex datasets and ask,
what does this actually mean for our audience?
Someone who can guide AI systems by saying,
interesting pattern, but let's explore the human context behind it.
Someone who understands that marketing isn't simply about efficiency, it's about connection, and connection is rarely achieved through algorithms alone. So, while artificial intelligence may be excellent at executing marketing tasks, it still relies heavily on humans to decide what those tasks should achieve, which means marketers are not disappearing. They are evolving. From platform managers to strategic thinkers, from campaign operators to customer interpreters, from spreadsheet custodians to people who occasionally step back and ask,
does any of this actually make sense to a human being?
And that, as it turns out, may be one of the most valuable questions in marketing, especially when machines are involved.
Part 3. Data everywhere, but insight still required.
Now, let's talk about data. Because if there's one thing modern marketing absolutely does not suffer from, is a lack of information. In fact, we now live in a marketing universe that's so saturated with data that many professionals spend a good proportion of their day staring at dashboards that look vaguely like the control panel of a spacecraft. There are graphs, there are heat maps, there are conversion funnels, there are performance indicators with names that sound both important and slightly alarming. Customer lifetime value, engagement velocity, attribution modelling. At some point in the past 20 years, marketing quietly became half psychology, half statistics, and half detective work, which is mathematically confusing but somehow accurate. And artificial intelligence has made this data landscape even more expansive. AI can now track, measure, analyse, and interpret customer behaviour across almost any digital interaction imaginable. Search behaviour, browsing patterns, purchase histories, social engagement, content consumption. It can even predict what someone might want to buy before they've decided they want it. Which, if we're honest, feels slightly like marketing has acquired a very polite psychic. Now, this abundance of data should theoretically make marketing incredibly straightforward. After all, if you have enough information about customers, you should be able to understand exactly what they want, when they want it, and how best to offer it to them. Simple. Except humans are involved. And humans have a rather inconvenient habit of behaving in ways that are not entirely logical. For example, someone might spend 3 hours researching the most economical vacuum cleaner on the market, and then out of impulse purchase a pair of trainers because a social media advert made them laugh. Or they may be carefully comparing prices across 6 different websites and then buy the slightly more expensive option because the brand name feels more trustworthy. Or even more, they might abandon an online shopping cart containing a perfectly sensible purchase and instead buy a decorative cactus holder shaped like a lamp. Marketing data can tell you what happened, but it does not always fully explain why it happened. And that distinction is where marketers' role becomes fascinating. Artificial intelligence is extremely good at spotting patterns. It can analyse millions of data points in seconds. It can highlight correlations that humans might take weeks to notice. It can identify behavioural trends across enormous customer groups. But pattern recognition is not the same as interpretation. Just because 2 things happen at the same time does not necessarily mean one caused the other. For instance, an AI system might report that engagement increases every time your brand posts its content on a Thursday afternoon. Excellent news. But why a Thursday? Is it the timing, the audience, the tone of the content, or is it that Thursday simply is the day your social media manager feels unusually optimistic and writes better captions? Machines will reveal the pattern and humans must uncover the story behind it. One of the quiet challenges of modern marketing is that dashboards can create an illusion of certainty. A beautifully designed analytics dashboard can make it appear as though everything is perfectly measurable and neatly explainable. But experienced marketers know that behind every metric lies a small cloud of mystery. So engagement might increase for reasons that no algorithm predicted. Campaigns succeed despite breaking every established rule, and occasionally a piece of content becomes wildly popular for reasons best described as the internet being the internet. This is why insight remains one of the most valuable skills in marketing. Insight is not simply reading numbers, it's asking questions about those numbers.
What changed? What surprised us? What does this reveal about our audiences?
And perhaps most importantly,
What should we do differently next time?
artificial intelligence gives marketers extraordinary analytical power, but human marketers still bring something unique to the table. Context, cultural awareness, humour, the ability to recognise when something is technically correct but emotionally absurd. For example, an AI might suggest targeting customers who previously purchased umbrellas with adverts for raincoats. Very logical. But a human might notice that the umbrella campaign occurred during a particularly rainy week in Scotland, which means everybody bought umbrellas, and the pattern might not be quite as meaningful as it first appeared. In other words, machines analyse behaviour. Humans interpret life. So while artificial intelligence can process more information than any marketing team ever could, it still relies on human curiosity to turn that information into insight. The dashboards may be smarter, the algorithms may be faster, but someone still has to sit back, sip their tea thoughtfully and say,
Interesting. But what does this actually mean?
and that person, rather reassuringly, is still the marketer, the human.
Part 4. Creativity, the last human frontier.
And now we arrive at the topic that tends to make marketers sit up slightly straighter in their chairs. Creativity. Because whenever artificial intelligence enters the conversation, someone inevitably asks the big question,
But can AI replace creativity?
and the honest answer, for, well, at least the moment, appears to be, sort of. Well, but not really. Occasionally in ways that are, perhaps, deeply weird. AI is remarkably good at generating creative material. It can produce images, write headlines, draft emails, suggest slogans, and generate entire marketing campaigns in seconds. You can ask an AI system for 50 variations of a product tagline, and it will deliver them faster than most creative teams can locate the biscuits.
Found them.
Which is impressive. But there is a subtle difference between generating content and creating ideas, and the difference is where humans still have the edge. AI systems are trained on enormous collections of existing information. They analyse patterns in language, images, and design, then recombine those patterns in new ways, which means AI is excellent at remixing the past. But humans have an inconvenient habit of inventing things that don't entirely follow existing patterns. Take some of the most memorable marketing campaigns in history. The ones that made people laugh. The ones that sparked conversations. The ones that became, whether you liked it or not, cultural references. Many of those ideas looked slightly ridiculous when they were first proposed, and that's because genuine creativity often involves a leap. A moment when someone says,
This may sound strange, but hear me out.
Machines are generally less enthusiastic about strange leaps. They prefer statistical confidence. Humans, on the other hand, occasionally build entire marketing campaigns around ideas that begin with,
What if we made a gorilla play the drums?
which, for those unfamiliar with the famous Cadbury advert, turned out to be a surprisingly effective strategy. AI also introduces another interesting dynamic. It makes content production astonishingly easy. So blogs, social posts, email copy, product descriptions, all of which now can be generated quickly and at scale, which sounds wonderful until you realise something. If every brand can produce content effortlessly, then content in itself becomes less valuable. Suddenly, the internet is not merely full of marketing messages, it's overflowing with them. An endless stream of headlines, images, posts, videos and campaigns, all competing for attention. In that environment, the brands that stand out will not simply be those producing the most content, they will be the ones producing ideas worth noticing. And that still requires human creativity. Another reason creativity remains deeply human is culture. So humour, irony, emotion, social context, these things are constantly shifting. What feels funny this year might feel tired next year. What resonates in one country may confuse people entirely in another. Humans live inside culture. We understand the references, we recognise the jokes, we know when something feels authentic and when it feels slightly awkward. Artificial intelligence can analyse cultural patterns, but it does not experience culture in the same way humans do, which is why some AI-generated creative ideas can feel technically impressive, but strangely soulless. Like a joke told by someone who understands the grammar of humour, but not the timing. Creativity often emerges from things machines struggle with, so personal experiences, unexpected connections, and emotional intuition. The ability to notice something odd about everyday life and turn it into an idea. Many great marketing campaigns began with observations like,
Isn't that strange that people always do this?
or
Why does everybody complain about that?
these insights come from human curiosity about human behaviour. And while machines are becoming increasingly capable, curiosity remains a distinctly human trait. Perhaps the most productive way to think about creativity in the AI era is not to think it as competition between humans and machines, but as collaboration. AI can generate variations, suggest directions, accelerate ideation, provide inspiration. Humans then apply judgment. They select the ideas that feel meaningful, they shape the narrative, they refine the message. It's a little like having an incredibly fast brainstorming partner who occasionally produces brilliant suggestions and occasionally proposes marketing slogans that sound like they were written by a particularly enthusiastic toaster. Which means the real creative skill in the AI era may not be generating ideas, it may be recognising the good ones. And that skill remains wonderfully, stubbornly human. So while artificial intelligence may dramatically increase the speed of content creation, creativity itself remains one of the most valuable human contributions to marketing. Machines may help us generate possibilities, but humans still decide what those possibilities mean. Because creativity is not just about producing material, it's about producing ideas that people care about. And as long as humans continue to respond to humour, emotion, surprise and storytelling, human creativity will remain very much in demand, even if the machines occasionally help with the headlines.
Part 5. Marketers as orchestrators.
So, if marketers are no longer primary campaign operators, what are they becoming? One useful way to think about it is this. Modern marketers are now orchestrators. They coordinate multiple elements, so data systems, automation tools, creative teams, customer insights, technical platforms, strategic objectives. They decide how these elements interact. They guide the technology rather than compete with it. They combine analytical insight with creative thinking. It's rather like conducting an orchestra. The conductor does not play every instrument, but they shape the performance. Similarly, marketers are shaping experiences across increasingly complex ecosystems, and those ecosystems now include AI.
Part 6. The skills that matter now.
All of this raises an interesting question. If AI handles increasing amounts of technical work, what skills will define the marketers of the future? Perhaps surprisingly, the most valuable skills are not entirely new. Strategic thinking, empathy, communication, curiosity, the ability to interpret cultural signals, the ability to understand people. These are deeply human abilities and they're remarkably difficult to automate. Technology changes quickly. Human behaviour evolves slowly, which means marketers who understand people will always remain viable.
Part Part 7, the human advantage.
At the heart of marketing lies something machines struggle to replicate fully, and that is human complexity. People do not always behave logically. They respond to stories, they react emotionally, they follow trends, they develop preferences that cannot always be explained by data alone. Marketing has always required an understanding of these subtleties. Understanding humour, understanding cultural context, understanding trust. And these are the areas where human intuition still plays a critical role. Artificial intelligence may help us analyse behaviour, but humans still understand experience.
Closing thought. Humans and machines.
So, where does this leave us? Artificial intelligence is not the end of marketing. Despite what some very confident conference speakers may suggest, we have not yet reached the point where machines sit in the corner of offices making brand strategy decisions while humans quietly refill the coffee. What we are seeing instead is a shift. Machines are becoming exceptionally good at the things machines should be good at. Processing in massive data sets, automating repetitive tasks, optimizing campaigns at speeds that would make human marketers stare at the screen and whisper,
Well, that's unsettling.
They handle the mechanics, the calculations, the dashboards, and occasionally they generate surprisingly decent headlines. But the deeper questions, the messy, complicated human questions, still belong to us. Why do people trust certain brands? Why do they laugh at some adverts and ignore others? Why do perfectly sensible adults spend 3 days researching a laptop and then buy one that comes in midnight blue instead of graphite grey? These are not questions machines can answer easily because they require understanding something that machines do not fully experience: being human. Marketing has never been about technology. It's always been about people, their hopes, their frustrations, their habits, their strange ability to make emotional decisions and then immediately justify them with very confident logic. And while artificial intelligence may become astonishingly clever in the years ahead, humans will continue to behave in wonderfully unpredictable ways, which means marketers will continue to have something interesting to figure out, even if the machines are doing most of the spreadsheets. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the podcast. Thank you again for joining me, and remember you can get involved with the conversation through our LinkedIn page. So until next time, stay curious and remember, artificial intelligence may help us understand the data, but humans still understand the story and occasionally buy things they absolutely didn't plan to 5 minutes earlier, which, if we're honest, keeps marketing wonderfully interesting. Cheers!
The Overthinker's Guide to Modern Marketing podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and many other podcast platforms where curious minds occasionally pause to wonder how humans, machines, and marketing will ever really coexist.